The elevator climbed toward the 80th floor like a golden bullet piercing the heart of Manhattan's skyline. Inside, Valentina Rosewood pressed her back against the mirrored wall, trying to make herself invisible while simultaneously wondering if her knockoff designer dress would fool anyone in a building where the doorknobs probably cost more than her monthly salary. "Breathe, Val," she whispered to her reflection. "You're just delivering coffee. How hard can it be?" The universe, as it turned out, had a twisted sense of humor. Ding. The doors slid open to reveal what could only be described as corporate Armageddon. Papers flew through the air like confetti at a very expensive, very angry wedding. A man in a $3,000 suit was gesticulating wildly at a massive screen displaying plummeting stock prices, while several other executives cowered behind a conference table that looked like it could house a small country's GDP. "What do you mean, Phoenix Industries stole our algorithm?" The voice belonged to Dante Castellano, CEO of Castellano Enterprises, whose face had turned an alarming shade of purple that definitely wasn't in this season's color palette. His dark hair was disheveled, his tie askew, and his usually immaculate appearance suggested he'd been personally wrestling with the stock market and losing. Valentina stood frozen in the elevator doorway, clutching her coffee tray like a caffeinated shield when Dante's steel-gray eyes locked onto hers. "And who, pray tell, are you?" Valentina's voice cracked like a 13-year-old boy's. "Coffee delivery?" The entire room fell silent. 20 pairs of eyes turned toward her, and she felt like a gazelle who'd accidentally wandered into a lion's shareholders meeting. Dante stalked toward her with the fluid grace of a panther in an Armani suit. "Coffee delivery? Miss, do you see what's happening here? My company is hemorrhaging money faster than a Las Vegas wedding chapel processes divorces, and you're worried about coffee." "Actually," Valentina said, surprising herself with her boldness, "studies show that caffeine can improve cognitive function by up to 12%, which means proper coffee consumption could theoretically help you think your way out of this mess instead of just, screaming at it." The silence that followed was so profound that Valentina was pretty sure she could hear her own career prospects flatling. Then, Dante threw back his head and laughed, a rich, genuine sound that transformed his entire face. Did she just give me business advice while delivering coffee?" "She's got a point, boss," muttered one of the executives. "You've been running on whiskey and rage for 3 days straight." "Whiskey and rage," Dante repeated, still chuckling. "That sounds like the title of my autobiography." He turned back to Valentina, his eyes sparkling with newfound interest. "What's your name, coffee oracle?" "Valentina Rosewood. And I'm not, actually a delivery girl. I mean, I am today, but I have an MBA from Columbia, and I'm only doing this because my landlord has trust issues with people who can't pay rent and—" "Stop!" Dante held up a hand, his expression shifting from amused to intrigued. "Columbia MBA? What's your specialty?" "Corporate strategy and crisis management," Valentina said, then immediately winced, which probably makes this whole scene extra painful to watch. Brutal honesty. I like that. Dante glanced at the chaos around him, then back at Valentina. "Tell me, Miss Rosewood, what would you do if you were in my position?" Valentina looked around the room, at the panicked executives, the devastating financial reports, the complete lack of strategic thinking. "Well, first I'd stop trying to fight Phoenix Industries head-on. Your enemy is Garrett Phoenix, right? He's expecting you to come at him like a bull in a china shop. Instead, you should be thinking like a chess player. Go on. You need someone on the inside, someone he'd never suspect. Someone who could get close enough to understand exactly how he stole your algorithm, and maybe find a way to return the favor." Valentina paused, realizing she was essentially describing corporate espionage to a room full of witnesses. Hypothetically. Speaking, of course. Dante's smile turned predatory. Hypothetically speaking, where would one find such a person? Someone smart enough to understand the technology, desperate enough to take risks, and invisible enough to fly under the radar. Someone like... Valentina trailed off as she realized every eye in the room was on her again. Someone like a Columbia MBA who's currently delivering coffee to pay her rent. Oh no. No. Valentina backed toward the elevator. I am not qualified to be a corporate spy. I once got caught sneaking extra ketchup packets from McDonald's. I'm basically the opposite of James Bond. Which is exactly why you'd be perfect, Dante said, moving closer. Phoenix would never suspect someone like you. You're poor, desperate, obvious, Valentina supplied helpfully. Brilliant, unexpected, and apparently exactly what I need. Dante pulled out his phone. Tell me, Miss Rosewood, how attached are you to coffee delivery? Not very. Why? Because I'm about to make you an offer you can't refuse. Work for me, as my secret weapon against Phoenix Industries. And I'll pay you more than you'd make in 5 years of coffee delivery. Plus, I'll handle that landlord situation. Valentina stared at him. This is insane. You don't even know me. I know you're brilliant, honest, and desperate. That's a powerful combination. Dante's expression softened slightly. Look, Valentina. Sometimes life gives us unexpected opportunities. The question is, are you brave enough to take them? Outside, lightning split the sky, illuminating the city in stark black and white, a perfect metaphor for the choice before her. She thought of her empty bank account, her unpaid student loans, her dreams of actually using her MBA for something more meaningful than memorizing coffee orders. If I say yes, she said slowly, what exactly would I be doing? Getting hired as Phoenix's new executive assistant, being my eyes and ears. And maybe, Dante's smile turned enigmatic, discovering that sometimes the best revenge is falling in love with the enemy. Valentina felt her heart skip a beat, though whether from fear or anticipation, she couldn't say. That's either the most romantic thing I've ever heard, or the most terrifying. Why not both? As she looked into Dante's eyes, Valentina realized her quiet, predictable life was about to become anything but. Little did she know that across town, Garrett Phoenix was about to make her an offer that would complicate everything in the most deliciously impossible way. Okay, she whispered. Let's do it. The storm outside seemed to rumble its approval. Valentina stood before the gleaming glass towers of Phoenix Industries, clutching her fake resume like a shield against her guilty conscience. 3 days of intensive coaching from Dante's team had transformed her from coffee delivery girl into corporate infiltrator, complete with a fabricated work history that would make even the most creative fiction writer jealous. Remember, she whispered to herself, you're Victoria Sinclair, former assistant to tech executives in Silicon Valley. You definitely didn't spend last Tuesday trying to explain to your landlord why your rent check bounced like a rubber ball in a racquetball court. The lobby of Phoenix Industries looked like something from a sci-fi movie where everyone wore designer suits instead of space helmets. Marble floors reflected crystal chandeliers, and the reception desk appeared to be carved from a single piece of obsidian. Even the plants looked expensive, probably imported from some exclusive botanical garden where each leaf cost more than her monthly grocery budget. Victoria Sinclair for Mr. Phoenix, she announced to the receptionist, a stunning blonde who looked like she'd stepped off a magazine cover and into corporate America without missing a beat. Penthouse. Elevator bank C. He's expecting you. The woman's smile was so perfect it could have been trademarked. As the elevator climbed toward the 90th floor, Valentina's stomach performed acrobatics that would have impressed Cirque du Soleil. She was about to meet the man she was supposed to spy on, the rival who had apparently stolen Dante's algorithm and was now her target for corporate espionage. This is fine, she muttered. I'm just a normal person going to a normal job interview, where I'll lie about everything except my shoe size. Ding! The doors opened to reveal paradise. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Manhattan, while the office itself looked like it had been designed by someone who believed that money could indeed buy happiness, and excellent. Interior decorating. Everything was white and gold and impossibly elegant, from the floating staircase to the living wall of exotic plants. And then she saw him. Garrett Phoenix stood with his back to her, silhouetted against the massive windows, like some kind of corporate Greek god. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that looked like he'd run his fingers through it, which, given the scattered papers on his desk, he probably had. When he turned around, Valentina felt her breath catch in her throat. If Dante was devastatingly handsome in a dangerous, brooding way, Garrett was beautiful in the way that made Renaissance artists weep with envy. Green eyes the color of jade sparkled with intelligence and warmth. His smile was the kind that could end wars or start them, and his entire presence radiated the kind of charm that should probably come with a warning label. "You must be Victoria," he said, and his voice was like warm honey mixed with expensive whiskey. "I'm Garrett." "Phoenix, welcome to Controlled Chaos." Valentina blinked. "Controlled Chaos? That's what I call my company. We innovate so fast that sometimes even I can't keep up." Garrett gestured around his office, which she now noticed was artfully messy, in a way that suggested creative genius rather than disorganization. "Most people call it cutting edge. I call it organized insanity with excellent Wi-Fi." Despite herself, Valentina laughed. "That's actually pretty accurate from what I've read about Phoenix Industries. You've done your research. I like that." Garrett moved toward her with easy confidence, and she caught a hint of his cologne, something that probably cost more than her car was worth. "Tell me, Victoria, what made you want to work for organized insanity?" This was it. The moment where she had to lie convincingly to the most attractive man she'd ever met, while simultaneously gathering intelligence for his mortal enemy. No pressure. "Honestly, I'm tired of predictable," she said, which was at least partially true. "I've worked for tech executives who think innovation means upgrading their coffee machines. I want to work for someone who's actually changing the world. And you think I'm changing the world?" There was something almost vulnerable in the way he asked it, as if her answer actually mattered to him. "Project Phoenix," Valentina said, remembering her briefing. "Clean energy that could revolutionize how we power cities. If that's not changing the world, I don't know what is." Garrett's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. "What do you know about Project Phoenix?" "Danger zone." Valentina felt like she was navigating a minefield in high heels. Only what's been in the tech magazines. Revolutionary energy storage, unprecedented efficiency ratings, potential to eliminate fossil fuel dependence. She paused, then added with a smile. "And apparently, it's making your competitors very nervous." Competitors like Dante Castellano? The way he said Dante's name made Valentina's stomach do that uncomfortable flip-flop again. There was history there, and not the good kind. "I don't really follow corporate drama," she lied smoothly. "I'm more interested in the work than the workplace politics. Smart policy." Garrett's smile returned, and Valentina felt her traitorous heart skip a beat. "You know what? I like your attitude, Victoria. You're hired." "Just like that?" Valentina blinked. "Don't you want to check my references? Review my portfolio? Ask me about my 5-year plan?" "My instincts about people are usually pretty good," Garrett said, extending his hand. "Besides, anyone who can make me laugh during a job." Interview is exactly what this place needs. When their hands touched, Valentina felt an electric shock that had nothing to do with static electricity and everything to do with the way Garrett's fingers lingered, just a moment too long against hers. "There is one thing," Garrett said, not releasing her hand. "This job comes with some unusual requirements." "Unusual how?" Valentina's voice came out slightly breathless. Well, for starters, you'll need to accompany me to corporate events. Charity galas, industry conferences, that sort of thing. Think of it as professional networking with better champagne. That sounds reasonable. And you'll need to be available 24/7 for the next few weeks. Project Phoenix is entering its final phase, and things are going to get intense. Define intense. Garrett's smile turned mischievous. Let's just say that Dante Castellano isn't the type to give up easily. He's going to try everything to stop us from launching Phoenix. Corporate espionage, sabotage, maybe even sending in a spy disguised as an executive assistant. Valentina's blood turned to ice water. A spy? Ridiculous, right? Garrett laughed, finally releasing her hand. I mean, who would be crazy enough to try something that obvious? Right, Valentina managed, her voice sounding strange even to her own ears. Totally ridiculous. But just in case, Garrett continued, his green eyes twinkling with mischief, I've implemented some security measures. Nothing too dramatic. Just enough to catch anyone who might not be who they claim to be. The room suddenly felt about 20 degrees warmer. Valentina wondered if corporate espionage came with health insurance, because she was pretty sure she was about to have a heart attack. Anyway, Garrett said cheerfully, when can you start? How about right now? Valentina said, figuring that the best defense was a good offense. I'm ready to dive into organized insanity. Excellent. Your first task is to help me prepare for tomorrow night's charity gala. It's the social event of the season, and every tech mogul in the city will be there. Garrett's expression grew serious, including Dante Castellano. As Valentina looked into Garrett's beautiful, trusting eyes, she realized that she was about to attend a high society event with the man she was supposed to be spying on, while her actual employer, who she was increasingly attracted to despite herself, would be watching from across the room. This, she muttered under her breath, is going to be complicated. If only she knew just how complicated things were about to become. The Waldorf Astoria ballroom looked like Cinderella's fever. Dream had collided with a Fortune 500 shareholder meeting. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across walls draped in silk, while New York's elite mingled beneath gold-leafed ceilings that had witnessed decades of power plays disguised as charity galas. Valentina stood at the entrance, feeling like she was about to walk into a lion's den wearing a meat dress. The emerald gown Garrett had insisted on buying her fit like it had been sewn directly onto her body by fairy godmothers with excellent taste and unlimited budgets. The problem wasn't how she looked. It was who she was looking for. Breathe, Victoria, she whispered, using her fake name like a mantra. You're just a normal executive assistant at a normal charity gala where you definitely won't run into Tim, your secret employer, while on the arm of the man you're supposed to be spying on. Talking to yourself already? Garrett appeared beside her, looking devastatingly handsome in a tuxedo that probably cost more than most people's cars. The evening hasn't even started. Just preparing for organized insanity with better champagne, Valentina managed, her voice slightly breathless. Being near Garrett was like standing too close to a bonfire. Warm, mesmerizing, and potentially dangerous. That's my girl, Garrett grinned, offering his arm. Ready to charm the pants-off New York social elite? Metaphorically speaking, of course. Of course, Valentina agreed, trying not to think about charming anyone's pants off, literally or metaphorically. They entered the ballroom like something out of a romantic movie. Garrett confident and charming, Valentina trying not to trip, over her designer heels, while scanning the crowd for a familiar, dark-haired figure who would probably want to murder her on sight. Garrett Phoenix. A woman who looked like she'd been preserved in expensive cosmetics since the Reagan administration, swooped toward them. Darling, you simply must tell me about this Phoenix project everyone's whispering about. Project Phoenix, Garrett corrected smoothly. And I'm afraid it's still classified, Mrs. Ashworth. But I promise you'll be among the first to know when we go public. Oh, you tease. Mrs. Ashworth giggled like a schoolgirl, then turned her predatory gaze on Valentina. And who is this gorgeous creature? Victoria Sinclair, my executive assistant, Garrett said, his hand settling protectively on the small of Valentina's back. The touch sent shivers up her spine that had nothing to do with the ballroom's air conditioning. Assistant? Mrs. Ashworth's eyebrows climbed toward her hairline. My dear, you're far too beautiful to be anyone's assistant. You should be running your own company. Actually, I find working with Mr. Phoenix quite stimulating, Valentina said, then immediately regretted her word choice when Garrett's eyes sparkled with amusement. I bet you do. Mrs. Ashworth winked conspiratorially. Enjoy the evening, children. Try not to cause too much of a scandal. As she fluttered away, Garrett leaned close to Valentina's ear. Stimulating? Professional stimulation, Valentina clarified quickly, her cheeks burning. Intellectual stimulation, work-related stimulation that has nothing to do with any other kind of stimulation whatsoever. Pity, Garrett murmured, his breath warm against her neck. I was hoping for at least a little scandal tonight. Before Valentina could respond, or spontaneously combust from embarrassment, the crowd parted like the Red Sea, revealing the one person she'd been dreading to see. Dante Castellano stood across the ballroom like a dark prince at a ball he hadn't been invited to, but had conquered anyway. His black tuxedo was impeccably tailored, his hair perfectly styled, and his steel-gray eyes were locked directly on hers with an expression that could have frozen champagne mid-pour. Excuse me, Valentina breathed, her voice barely audible. I need some air. Victoria? Garrett's concern was immediate. Are you all right? Just the crowd. Give me a moment. She fled toward the balcony before Garrett could respond, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird trying to escape. The cool night air hit her face, providing blessed relief from the suffocating weight of her double life. Running away already? Valentina spun around to find Dante stepping out of the shadows like he'd materialized from her guilty conscience. Up close, he was even more intimidating than she remembered, all sharp angles and dangerous elegance. What are you doing here? She hissed. It's a charity gala. I'm being charitable. Dante's smile was razor sharp. The question is, what are you doing here with him? My job. You know, the one you blackmailed me into? Blackmail is such an ugly word. I prefer aggressive recruitment. Dante moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the small space. How's it going, by the way? Learn anything interesting about Project Phoenix? Valentina glanced back through the glass doors, where she could see Garrett chatting with potential investors, his easy smile making her chest tighten with guilt. He's not what I expected. Meaning? Valentina struggled for words. He's kind, funny. He actually cares about his employees, and his project really could change the world, and you're falling for him, Dante finished, his voice dangerously quiet. No, I mean, it's complicated. It's simple. Dante stepped closer, backing her against the balcony railing. You work for me. He's the enemy. Don't confuse business with pleasure, Victoria. That's not even my real name, Valentina whispered. No, but it could be. You could become anyone you want in this world. Powerful, wealthy, influential. All you have to do is remember whose side you're on. For a moment, they stood frozen in tableau, Dante's intense gaze boring into hers, the city lights twinkling below them like fallen stars. Then the balcony door opened. Victoria? I was worried. Garrett stopped short, his expression shifting as he took in the scene before him. Dante Castellano. I should have known. Phoenix. Dante straightened, his business mask sliding into place. Lovely party. I particularly admire your choice in staff. The temperature on the balcony dropped about 20 degrees. Valentina felt like she was watching two apex predators size each other up while she stood helplessly between them. Victoria works for me now, Garrett said, his voice pleasant, but with an edge that could cut glass. I trust that won't be a problem. Why would it be a problem? Dante smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Though I have to ask, Victoria Sinclair, wasn't it? That's an interesting name. Almost fictional. Valentina's blood turned to ice. He was going to expose her. Right here, right now, in front of Garrett and half of New York's social elite. All names are fictional to some degree, Garrett replied smoothly, moving to stand beside Valentina. Don't you think, Dante? After all, we all play roles in this grand theater of business. Indeed we do. Dante's gaze lingered on Valentina for a moment longer than necessary. Well, I should return to the party. Enjoy your evening, all of you. As Dante disappeared back into the ballroom, Valentina realized she was gripping the balcony railing so tightly her knuckles had gone white. You know him, Garrett said quietly. It wasn't a question. Everyone in tech knows Dante Castellano by reputation, Valentina said carefully. That's not what I meant. Garrett turned to face her fully, his green eyes searching her face. Victoria, is there something you need to tell me? This was it. The moment where she could come clean, tell him the truth, and hope that whatever was growing between them was strong enough to survive the revelation that she was a corporate spy sent to steal his life's work. Instead, she looked into his beautiful, trusting eyes and heard herself say, No, there's nothing to tell. Garrett studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right then. Shall we go back inside? I believe they're about to start the auction, and I promised to bid on a weekend in the Hamptons. A weekend in the Hamptons? Valentina managed a shaky laugh. That sounds dangerously close to a romantic getaway. Only if you're willing to risk it, Garrett said, offering his arm again. After all, life's too short for safe choices. As they walked back into the ballroom, Valentina couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to make the most dangerous choice of her life, and she wasn't entirely sure which man represented the greater risk to her heart. The auction was about to begin, but the real bidding war had already started. And Valentina Rosewood, or Victoria Sinclair, or whoever she was becoming, was the prize neither man was willing to lose. Valentina stared at her laptop screen at 2:47 a.m., her eyes burning from hours of pretending to work while actually having an existential crisis. 3 weeks had passed since the charity gala, 3 weeks of living a double life that was becoming more impossible by the day. Her apartment looked like a war zone where corporate espionage had battled romantic confusion, and both sides were losing. On one side of her coffee table sat Dante's encrypted phone, buzzing incessantly with demands for updates on Project Phoenix. On the other side lay a bouquet of white roses from Garrett, accompanied by a note that read, For the woman who makes organized insanity feel like poetry. This is fine, she muttered to her reflection in the laptop screen. I'm just a normal person who's simultaneously betraying and falling in love with the same man while being blackmailed by another man who's starting to look at me like I'm dessert, and he's been on a diet for 6 months. Her phone rang. Dante's name flashed on the screen like a digital harbinger of doom. We need to meet. His voice was clipped, professional. But underneath, she detected something that sounded dangerously like jealousy. Now. It's almost 3 a.m., Dante. Normal people are sleeping. Normal people aren't corporate spies who've been radio silent for 2 weeks. Rooftop of the Chrysler Building, 1 hour. The line went dead. Valentina stared at her phone, then at the roses, then at the pile of Project Phoenix documents she'd been pretending to photograph for her reports. The truth was, she hadn't sent Dante any real intelligence in weeks. Every time she tried to betray Garrett's trust, She remembered the way his eyes lit up when he talked about clean energy, or how he always asked about her day, or the way he'd held her hand during the documentary about polar bears last Tuesday. "I'm going to hell," she announced to her empty apartment, "and I'll probably run into my fake identity there, because she's definitely going too." An hour later, Valentina stood on the Chrysler Building's observation deck. The city spread out below her like a circuit board of glittering lights. The wind whipped through her hair as she waited, wondering if this was how double agents always felt, like they were standing on the edge of a very tall building, metaphorically speaking. "You're late." Dante emerged from the shadows like he'd been carved from them, his dark coat billowing dramatically in the wind. "You're melodramatic," Valentina replied. "Seriously, who meets on rooftops at 3 a.m.? Are we in a Batman movie?" "If we were, I'd be the villain." Dante moved closer, his steel gray eyes intense. "Which makes me wonder what that makes you." The confused sidekick who's questioning her life choices? Try the double agent who's forgotten which side she's on. Dante pulled out a tablet, swiping to reveal surveillance photos of Valentina and Garrett. There she was, laughing at lunch, holding hands at a museum, looking absolutely besotted during what was supposed to be a business dinner. "I'm doing my job," Valentina said weakly. "Your job is intelligence gathering, not method acting." Dante's voice carried a dangerous edge. "These photos tell a story, Valentina. And it's not the story of a woman following orders." "Maybe because the orders are insane." The words exploded out of her before she could stop them. "You want me to destroy a man whose only crime is being brilliant and kind and completely dedicated to saving the planet. Do you know what Project Phoenix actually does, Dante? It could eliminate energy poverty worldwide. It could stop climate change. It could bankrupt my company and destroy everything I've built." Dante interrupted, his mask of control slipping. "Do you think I care about polar bears when my life's work is at stake?" "Maybe you should," Valentina shot back. "Maybe if you spent less time plotting corporate revenge and more time actually innovating, you wouldn't need to steal from your competitors." The silence that followed was so profound that Valentina could hear her own heartbeat echoing off the building's Art Deco facade. Dante stared at her like she'd just slapped him with a white glove and challenged him to a duel. "You're in love with him," he said finally, his voice deadly quiet. "I'm not," Valentina started, then stopped. Because the truth was written all over her face, probably in neon letters that could be seen from space. "You are." Dante laughed, but there was no humor in it. The great Dante Castellano, outsmarted by Cupid. How poetic. "Dante, No." He held up a hand, and for the first time since she'd met him, Dante looked vulnerable. "Let me finish. 3 months ago, I thought I had everything figured out. Destroy Phoenix, reclaim my position as the tech industry's golden boy, prove that Dante Castellano always wins. Simple. And now I'm standing on a rooftop at 3 a.m., looking at a woman who was supposed to be my secret weapon, and realizing that somewhere along the way, I stopped wanting to destroy my enemy and started wanting to..." He trailed off, his jaw clenching. "Started wanting to what?" Dante turned away, bracing his hands against the railing. "It doesn't matter. What matters is Project Phoenix launches in 4 days. 4 days, Valentina. After that, it's over. For both of us." "What do you mean?" "I mean that if I can't stop Phoenix, Castellano Enterprises will fold within 6 months. And if that happens..." Dante's voice grew quiet. "Let's just say bankruptcy court isn't kind to former billionaires." For the first time, Valentina saw past Dante's armor of arrogance and ambition to the man. Underneath, brilliant, driven, and absolutely terrified of losing everything he'd worked for. "There has to be another way," she said softly. "There is." Dante turned back to her, his expression shifting. "But you're not going to like it. Try me." The Phoenix launch is happening at the Meridian Hotel tomorrow night. Black tie affair, all the tech press, live streaming to a global audience. If something were to go wrong during the demonstration... Dante pulled out a small device that looked innocuous enough to be a flash drive. This contains a virus that would corrupt Phoenix's core algorithms. No permanent damage, just enough system failure to discredit the project publicly. Valentina stared at the device like it was a live grenade. You want me to sabotage the launch. I want you to choose a side, once and for all. And if I refuse? Dante's expression hardened. Then I make a phone call to Garrett Phoenix about his assistant Victoria Sinclair, who doesn't actually exist. I'm sure he'd be fascinated to learn about the real Valentina Rosewood, her sick brother, and her very interesting employment arrangement with his biggest rival. The city lights blurred as tears sprang to Valentina's eyes. You're not giving me a choice. Life rarely does. Dante pressed the device into her palm, his fingers lingering against hers. For what it's worth, Valentina. In another universe. One where we met under different circumstances, things might have been different between us. Dante. 4 days, he repeated, stepping back into the shadows. Make your choice. As his footsteps faded, Valentina stood alone on the rooftop, clutching the device that could destroy everything Garrett had worked for. Below her, the city hummed with late-night energy, oblivious to the drama playing out in the clouds above. Her phone buzzed. A text from Garrett. Can't sleep. Thinking about clean energy and how lucky I am to have the most amazing assistant in New York. Sweet dreams, Victoria. Tomorrow we change the world. Valentina closed her eyes, feeling the weight of both men's expectations crushing down on her like the pressure at the bottom of the ocean. In 4 days, Project Phoenix would launch. In 4 days, she would have to choose between the man she loved and the man who held her brother's life in his hands. This, she whispered to the wind, is definitely not how romantic comedies are supposed to work. But as she looked at the device in her palm and thought about the impossible choice ahead, Valentina realized that sometimes love wasn't about happy endings. Sometimes it was about finding the courage to do the right thing, even when every choice felt wrong. The countdown to heartbreak had begun. The Meridian Hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed into something that looked like Tony Stark's fever dream, crossed with a TED Talk. Holographic displays floated above tables set with crystal and gold, while a massive screen dominated the far wall, ready to broadcast Project Phoenix to the world. The guest list read like a who's who of global power brokers, tech moguls, and journalists whose reviews could make or break empires. Valentina stood at Garrett's side, wearing a midnight blue gown that made her feel like a beautiful fraud, which, she reflected grimly, was exactly what she was. In her evening clutch, nestled next to her lipstick and breath mints, sat Dante's virus device like a digital dagger pointed at the heart of everything Garrett had worked for. You look nervous, Garrett murmured, his hand finding hers as the crowd continued to arrive. Don't be. Tonight's going to be perfect. Perfect, Valentina repeated, the word tasting like ashes in her mouth. Right. Across the room, she spotted Dante making his entrance like a dark prince arriving at a ball he intended to burn down. He moved through the crowd with predatory grace, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries while his eyes remained fixed on her. When their gazes met, he raised his champagne glass in a mock toast that made her stomach clench with dread. Ladies and gentlemen, the event coordinator's voice boomed through the ballroom. Please take your seats. The presentation will begin in 5 minutes. As the crowd settled, Valentina felt like she was watching her own execution being prepared. The device in her clutch seemed to pulse with malevolent energy, waiting for her to make the choice that would define the rest of her life. You know what the best part about tonight is? Garrett said softly, his green eyes bright with excitement and something deeper, something that looked dangerously like love. What's that? Valentina managed. "Sharing it with you. 3 months ago, I was just a guy with a crazy dream and a lab full of prototypes. Now," he squeezed her hand, "now I have someone who believes in the dream as much as I do." Valentina felt something crack inside her chest. "Garrett, I know this might not be the right time or place," he continued, reaching into his jacket pocket. "But when you're about to change the world, you want to do it with the person who changed yours." Time stopped. The ballroom, the crowd, the weight of corporate espionage, everything faded as Garrett pulled out a small velvet box that could only contain one thing. "Victoria Sinclair," he said, dropping to one knee right there in front of 500 people and a live global audience. "Will you marry me?" The ballroom erupted in gasps and camera flashes. Somewhere in the chaos, Valentina heard someone shout, "Plot twist," and another voice yelling, "Get it, Phoenix!" But all she could see was Garrett's hopeful face. All she could hear was her own, heart shattering into a million pieces. Because he was proposing to Victoria Sinclair, a woman who didn't exist. And the real Valentina Rosewood was about to destroy the most wonderful man she'd ever met. Valentina's voice cracked. Around them, the crowd held its collective breath, phones recording what was supposed to be a romantic moment but felt more like a public execution. That's when the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in an eerie red glow as murmurs of confusion rippled through the crowd. Valentina heard someone shout about checking the backup generators, while security guards spoke urgently into their earpieces. "Technical difficulties, folks," Garrett called out, somehow managing to sound charming even while kneeling in a darkened ballroom. "Phoenix Industries, we solve global energy crises, but apparently hotel lighting is still a work in progress." The crowd laughed, the tension breaking slightly. But Valentina felt a hand grip her arm, and suddenly Dante was beside her in the chaos. "Perfect timing," he whispered in her ear. "The universe is giving you a sign, Valentina. Use it." "I can't," she breathed. "You can, and you will. Or Victoria Sinclair disappears forever, along with any chance your brother has of survival." The lights flickered back on, and Garrett rose smoothly to his feet, the ring box still in his hand. "Well, that was dramatic. But I believe I asked you a question, Victoria." 500 pairs of eyes focused on her. Cameras zoomed in for the close-up. Somewhere in the crowd, she could see Dante watching with predatory intensity. And there was Garrett, beautiful and trusting, and completely unaware that the woman he loved was about to choose between his heart and her brother's life. "Garrett," Valentina said, her voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence. "There's something I need to tell you." "Anything," he said immediately. "My name isn't Victoria Sinclair." The ballroom went dead quiet. Garrett's expression shifted from hopeful to confused. "What?" "My real name is Valentina Rosewood, and 3 months ago, Dante Castellano blackmailed me into spying on you." The words tumbled out like a dam bursting. "My brother is dying, and Dante promised to pay for his treatment if I stole Project Phoenix's secrets. I've been living a lie since the day we met." The silence that followed was so profound that Valentina could hear her own heartbeat echoing off the ballroom's crystal chandeliers. Garrett stared at her like she'd just announced she was an alien from Mars with a side business in corporate espionage. "You're a spy," he said slowly. Am. It's complicated." Valentina pulled the virus device from her clutch, holding it up for everyone to see. "Dante gave me this tonight. It's designed to corrupt Phoenix's algorithms during the demonstration. He wanted me to destroy your life's work." "Wanted?" Garrett's voice was very quiet, very controlled. "I can't do it." Valentina looked directly into his eyes, ignoring the gasps and murmurs from the crowd. "I can't destroy something beautiful just because I'm scared. I can't hurt the man I love even if it costs me everything." Without breaking eye contact, she dropped the device to the marble floor and crushed it under her heel, the sound echoing through the ballroom like a gunshot. "You love me?" Garrett asked, and despite everything, the revelation, the betrayal, the very public humiliation, his voice held wonder. "I love you," Valentina confirmed, tears streaming down her face. "Which is why I had to tell you the truth, even though it means losing you forever." The crowd began to buzz with excitement and confusion. Someone shouted, "Better than reality TV!" while phones recorded every moment of what was becoming the most famous corporate event in recent history. That's when Dante stepped forward, his face a mask of cold fury. "How touching," he said, his voice carrying easily through the ballroom. "But I'm afraid Miss Rosewood has forgotten the terms of our agreement." "The agreement is off," Valentina said, turning to face him. "I won't be your weapon anymore, Dante." "Then your brother dies," Dante replied with brutal simplicity. "Without the treatment I'm funding, he has maybe 6 weeks left. Are you really willing to let him pay the price for your sudden attack of conscience?" The ballroom fell silent again. This was no longer corporate drama. This was life and death, playing out in front of a global audience. "Actually," a new voice cut through the tension, "I think there might be another option." Everyone turned to see a familiar figure stepping through the crowd. Miguel Rosewood, Valentina's supposedly dying brother, looking very much alive and considerably healthier than when she'd last seen him. "Miguel?" Valentina gasped. "How are you here? You're supposed to be in the hospital, dying of a rare genetic condition?" Miguel smiled ruefully. "Yeah, about that. Turns out Mr. Castellano's doctors were a little creative with their diagnosis." Dante's face went pale. "That's impossible." "Is it?" Miguel pulled out a thick folder of medical records. "Because according to my real doctors, the ones who aren't on your payroll, I never had a genetic condition at all. Just a minor autoimmune disorder that cleared up with basic treatment 3 months ago." The ballroom erupted in chaos. Reporters shouted questions, guests pulled out phones, and security guards looked like they were wondering if they should arrest someone, but weren't sure who. "You lied," Valentina breathed, staring at Dante in shock. "My brother was never dying." "Details," Dante said dismissively, but his usual confidence was cracking. The point is that you orchestrated an elaborate fraud to manipulate an innocent woman into corporate espionage," Garrett interrupted, his voice carrying the authority of a man who just realized he held all the cards, "which, I believe, is illegal in several different ways." "You can't prove anything," Dante snarled. "Actually, we can." Miguel held up his phone. "See, when someone tries to convince you you're dying, you tend to record your medical conversations, especially when those conversations involve falsified test results and bribery." As if summoned by the chaos, FBI agents began filtering through the crowd. Apparently, someone had been very busy behind the scenes. "Dante Castellano," the lead agent announced. "You're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and attempted corporate sabotage." As they led Dante away in handcuffs, he looked back at Valentina one last time. "This isn't over," he called out. "Yeah, it is," Miguel replied cheerfully. "Also, your lawyers called. Something about bankruptcy proceedings? Anyway, they seemed stressed." With Dante gone and the FBI sorting through the chaos, the ballroom slowly began to return to something resembling normal, if normal included a failed marriage proposal, a foiled corporate conspiracy, and enough drama to fuel a dozen Hollywood movies. Garrett stood in the middle of it all, still holding the ring box, looking like a man who just had his entire world turned upside down and wasn't sure which way was up anymore. "So," he said finally, his voice carefully neutral, "your real name is Valentina Rosewood." "Yes." "And you were never actually dying. Miguel was never dying, and Dante fabricated an entire medical crisis to blackmail you into spying on me." "That's accurate. But you fell in love with me anyway." "Despite my better judgment, yes." Garrett nodded slowly, processing this information. Then, to everyone's amazement, he started to laugh. "You know what the really crazy part is?" he said, tears of laughter streaming down his face. "I don't care." "You don't care?" Valentina echoed. "I mean, I care about the lying and the spying and the general deception," Garrett clarified. "But the important part, the part where you chose love over fear, truth over security, that's the part that matters." He opened the ring box again, the diamond catching the ballroom lights like a captured star. "So, Valentina Rosewood," he said, not kneeling this time but standing tall and sure. "Will you marry me? The real you, I mean. No more lies, no more fake identities, just us." Valentina looked around the ballroom, at the cameras still recording, at Miguel grinning like an idiot, at the 500 strangers who'd just witnessed the most insane romantic comedy of their lives. Then she looked back at Garrett, the man who'd somehow managed to fall in love with her despite everything. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I'll marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her in front of God, the global internet, and the FBI, Valentina realized that sometimes the best love stories were the ones that started with the worst possible circumstances. And somewhere in the chaos, as Project Phoenix's launch continued flawlessly and the crowd cheered their approval, she heard someone shout, "Now that's how you do a plot twist." She couldn't have agreed more. 6 months later, the penthouse terrace of Phoenix Industries gleamed in the golden light of a perfect Manhattan sunset, transformed into something that looked like a fairy tale had collided with a tech magazine photo shoot. White roses cascaded from crystal arrangements, while strings of lights created a canopy of stars above the assembled guests. The view of the city skyline provided a backdrop that no Hollywood set designer could have improved upon. Valentina stood before an antique mirror in the bridal suite, adjusting her wedding dress, a creation of silk and dreams that made her feel like she was floating on clouds made of hope and expensive fabric. The woman in the reflection looked nothing like the desperate coffee delivery girl who'd stumbled into Dante's office 6 months ago. This woman was radiant, confident, and absolutely glowing with happiness. "You look like you're about to marry a billionaire and live happily ever after," Miguel said from the doorway, looking devastatingly handsome in his role as man of honor. His health had returned completely once he'd stopped taking Dante's special vitamins, which turned out to be mild immunosuppressants designed to mimic illness symptoms. "I look like I'm about to marry the love of my life," Valentina corrected, then grinned. "The fact that he's a billionaire is just excellent bonus packaging." Speaking of packaging, Miguel held up his phone. "You're trending worldwide." Phoenix wedding. Ease is the #1 hashtag, and apparently someone started a betting pool on whether you'll include corporate espionage in your vows. Please tell me you bet against that. I bet for it. Those odds were too good to pass up. Valentina laughed, the sound bright and free in a way it hadn't been for months. "How's our special guest doing?" Miguel's expression shifted to one of amused satisfaction. "Dante? Oh, he's settling into minimum security prison beautifully. Apparently he started a business consultancy for fellow white-collar criminals, because nothing says, 'I've learned my lesson,' like monetizing your criminal expertise." "And his company?" Castellano Enterprises filed for bankruptcy 3 months ago. The board voted to restructure as a sustainable energy company focused on, and, I quote, "ethical innovation and environmental responsibility." They've asked Garrett to consult on their rebranding. "Of course they have." Valentina shook her head in amazement. Only Garrett would turn his biggest rival into a business partner. "He's disgustingly noble that way," Miguel agreed. "It's almost annoying how perfect you two are together." Soft knock interrupted them, and Garrett's assistant, his real assistant, a delightfully efficient woman named Sarah, who had zero interest in corporate espionage, peeked in. "It's time," she announced. "And I have to say, the groom looks like he's about to either faint from happiness or break into spontaneous song." "Either one sounds about right," Valentina said, taking Miguel's arm. Ready to walk me down the aisle? Brother? Ready to hand you over to someone who deserves you? Absolutely. The ceremony was everything Valentina had never dared to dream about. Garrett stood at the altar looking like he'd stepped out of a romance novel. Perfectly tailored tuxedo, eyes shining with emotion, and a smile that could have powered half of Manhattan. When the music began, and Valentina appeared at the end of the rose-petal-strewn aisle, his expression shifted to something that made every guest reach for their tissues. "Dearly beloved," the officiant began, but Garrett interrupted. "Actually, if you don't mind, I'd like to say something first." He turned to address the assembled crowd, which included tech moguls, former enemies, FBI agents who'd become friends, and at least 3 documentary crews. 6 months ago, I thought I had my life figured out. Successful company, revolutionary technology, a plan to change the world. What I didn't have was someone to share it with. He turned back to Valentina, his voice growing softer. Then, a woman delivered coffee to my office during the worst crisis of my career. She gave me business advice, called me out on my dramatic tendencies, and somehow made chaos feel like poetry. I fell in love with her honesty, her brilliance, and her terrible attempts at corporate espionage. The crowd laughed, and Valentina felt tears threatening to ruin her makeup. "Valentina Rosewood," Garrett continued, "you taught me that the best innovations aren't technological, they're personal. You showed me that love isn't about perfect circumstances, it's about choosing each other despite imperfect ones. And you proved that sometimes the most beautiful relationships are the ones that start with the worst possible meet cute." "Now you're just showing off," Valentina whispered, making him grin. "I do, Valentina Rosewood, take you to be my wife, my partner in organized insanity, and my favorite person to share both success and failure with. I promise to love the real you, trust the honest you, and never again propose during a corporate crisis." "That last one's probably for the best," Valentina agreed, then turned to the crowd. "I also have something to say." She looked out at the faces before her. Friends, family, former enemies turned wedding guests, and at least one federal agent who'd become a surprisingly good friend during the investigation. 6 months ago, I was someone else entirely. Victoria Sinclair was confident, sophisticated, and completely fictional. Valentina Rosewood was broke, desperate, and drowning in circumstances beyond her control. She turned back to Garrett. "But you didn't fall in love with the perfect woman I was pretending to be. You fell in love with the messy, complicated, occasionally criminal woman I actually am." "Occasionally criminal?" Miguel called out. "You were a corporate spy." "Alleged corporate spy," Valentina corrected. "The charges were dropped, remember? Only because you helped catch the real criminal." "Details." Valentina waved him off, then focused on Garrett again. "Garrett Phoenix, you taught me that love isn't about hiding your flaws. It's about finding someone who sees them and chooses you anyway. You showed me that happily ever after isn't a destination. It's a choice you make every day. And you proved that sometimes the best relationships are built on honesty, trust, and excellent Wi-Fi." "The Wi-Fi really is excellent," someone in the crowd confirmed. "I do, Garrett Phoenix, take you to be my husband, my partner in legitimate business ventures only, and my favorite person to share both clean energy innovations and really good takeout with. I promise to love your ambitious dreams, support your world-changing projects, and never again lie about my identity unless it's for surprise party planning purposes." "Deal," Garrett said immediately. "Then by the power vested in me by the state of New York and the internet ordination I got last week," the officiant announced, "I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride, and please make it good, because this is being live-streamed to 47 countries." When Garrett kissed Valentina, the crowd erupted in cheers that could probably be heard in Brooklyn. Fireworks exploded over the Manhattan skyline, courtesy of Phoenix Industries' new partnership with the city's tourism board. And somewhere in the celebration, someone started playing "At Last" by Etta James. As they broke apart, both breathless And grinning, Garrett whispered, "So, Mrs. Phoenix, what's our next move?" "Well," Valentina said, looking out at their friends, their city, and their impossibly bright future. "I was thinking we could try that honeymoon in the Hamptons you mentioned. You know, the one that sounded dangerously close to a romantic getaway?" "Only if you're willing to risk it," Garrett replied, echoing his words from their first charity gala. "With you, I'm willing to risk everything." And as they walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, past cheering guests and flashing cameras, Valentina reflected that sometimes the best love stories were the ones that started with the worst possible circumstances and ended with the most impossible happiness. 1 year later, Project Phoenix had revolutionized clean energy worldwide, earning Garrett a Nobel Prize nomination, and Valentina a new title as Chief Strategy Officer of Phoenix Industries. Miguel had become the company's head of ethical compliance, AE, position created specifically for someone who understood the importance of keeping corporations honest. Dante, meanwhile, had been released from minimum security prison after serving 8 months and immediately started a podcast called Confessions of a Corporate Villain. It was surprisingly popular, though his attempts to interview Garrett and Valentina for a reunion episode had been politely but firmly declined. The Phoenix Mansion, because successful billionaires apparently came with mansions, had become an unofficial headquarters for sustainable technology startups, with Valentina and Garrett hosting monthly innovation dinners for entrepreneurs who were more interested in changing the world than making money. "You know what the strangest part is?" Valentina said one evening as they sat on their terrace, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. "What's that, Mrs. Phoenix?" Garrett asked, pulling her closer on their ridiculously comfortable outdoor couch. "A year ago, I was delivering coffee and lying about my identity. Now I'm married to a Nobel Prize nominee, running strategy for a company that's literally saving the planet, and somehow managing to be completely, impossibly happy." "Stranger things have happened," Garrett said thoughtfully. "Though admittedly, not many." "I love you, Garrett Phoenix," Valentina said, meaning it with every fiber of her being. "I love you too, Valentina Phoenix," he replied. "Even if you did try to steal my corporate secrets." "Alleged secret stealing," she corrected automatically. "Right. Alleged." And as the stars began to appear over Manhattan, reflecting the lights of a city full of dreams and possibilities, they sat together in comfortable silence, knowing that their love story, messy, complicated, and absolutely perfect, was just beginning. The end.